The agenda calls for us to look at current trends in IT, talk about how those trends will impact the future, and I thought a good way for it to start would be for me to give kind of a quick overview of the trends from a U.S. perspective, which is very different than the regional perspective here. My thinking behind that, I know some of you were here yesterday and saw the SCG presentation, and it was really interesting. It had a nice graphic that talked about a process for starting with a flourishing economy and ending up with eco-products that are actually produced. The forcing function was a flourishing economy. And in the U.S. right now, we've got growth rates somewhere between 0 and 1%. Which is not really a flourishing economy, where some of the Asian countries are doing much better from a growth perspective in the 5 to 10% range. And so that really changes the perspectives on the trends. So I thought it would be kind of interesting if I wouldn't pretend to be an expert on the Asian market. I know a little bit, but I can give you my perspective from the U.S., and then we'll turn it over and let each panel member go sequentially, and they can discuss their view on the trends and how they relate to the Asian market. And the way the agenda calls is that we go through several rounds of discussions, and if we have time, we get into some additional topics that have to do with how these trends relate to future investment in IT in the region and internationally, and also how IT departments can prepare for the changes that are coming. And we've had some discussions before the session, especially with what types of resources, in particular labor resources, might be needed to support the trends in the future. So I'll let each panel member introduce themselves and their background.
All right, thanks very much. I'm Dr. Ahmed Shuja Sayed. I got my MS from Sweden, PhD from University of Surrey in England in electrical and electronic engineering. My postdoc from Bell Labs, USA. Currently, I am basically the executive director of Center for Emerging Sciences, Engineering and Technology at Islamabad in Pakistan, and also the affiliate faculty at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, California, USA.
Okay, so I'm Matthew Daly. I guess some of you got an introduction to me already. I guess I'd add that after doing the PhD in the U.S., I spent some time in various startups, especially in the robotics field, computer vision, embedded systems types of areas. And then I came to Thailand back in 2005. And so since then I've been working as an academic and focusing on areas such as software engineering and so on.
My name is Dr. Paul Janicek. I'm originally from the U.S. I worked a little bit in industry in Intel many years ago, and then I went back to research in academics and had my PhD from the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Lausanne, Switzerland. I came to the AIT in 2005, where I taught as an assistant professor in the computer science information management. And then 2 years ago, I left to start working in some startups and created a software company about a little over a year ago here in Thailand.
Hello, my name is Nazrul Islam. I'm from Bangladesh. Basically, my bachelor degree is in electrical engineering. Then I switched over from there to industrial engineering and management, and then my PhD on technology management. After that, again, I worked mainly on technology transfer, technology management, high-tech entrepreneurship, and plus the IT applications in different service sectors, including hospitality, hotels, and hospitals. Right now, I am a professor at the School of Management at AIT. That's all. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much. And as I said, I will start the introduction part of the session by giving you a perspective on IT and current trends and future trends from a U.S. perspective. And then the panel will correct all of my mistakes and will relate it to the region. And I do have quite a few notes, but I'm only going to do some of them and so that we can stay focused. I guess I'm giving away how we've realigned our business over the last few years by discussing these trends, because these have been right on my mind, because we've had to adapt to the changes that are going on in IT. And for us, I know the biggest change has been the commoditization of infrastructure. I mean, at the application level, commoditization and managed services has not been nearly as prominent as it has at the infrastructure level. And corresponding with that, wage rates and salaries have declined in the U.S., and in particular, for some particular assets like system administrators or some certain types of application developers, they're quite easy to find and are almost substitutable in the labor market. More specialized individuals that have certain expertise in areas like data integration or for example, I've just been trying to hire a couple of business objects architects in the last few. They're commanding still high salaries and are in short supply. The second item I think that has been most prominent and notable to us has been the re-centralization of IT. We fought long and hard back during the 80s and the 90s to wrestle control away from the IT department and move to a decentralized model. And now we're clearly, at least in the USA, we're moving back in the opposite direction. We're moving back towards more centralized control. And what goes along with that is a more of an emphasis on cost and cost reductions due to standardization and the centralized control of resources. Seeing a lot of emphasis on mobile applications, but a lot of concerns about security, how that will be managed over time. More emphasis on data for two reasons, I think. One, there's a lot of fragmentation still across the technology landscape, but other is the cloud and trying to understand how to manage data, in particular data integration, data security, data transport, and cloud infrastructure types environments. More emphasis on, we used to, and many times, respond to RFPs where we were given a set of objectives and leeway in terms of recommending solutions to the customer. Now, more and more often, the solutions are prescribed in much more detail, and we have to provide more precise resources for doing exact tasks. We're seeing increased emphasis on in-memory computing. As a matter of fact, a lot of the applications are transitioning now to in-memory computing platforms, and the recipients of those applications are not going to have over time the opportunity to avoid that. They're going, if they stay with their current application data sets, they're going to have to move to those types of platforms. Well, maybe I'll just stop right there with that as kind of an introduction and let you guys go after it. I suggest we just go in the same order as the introductions, if you're okay with that.
Right. Okay. So we had this discussion about like a year back in California, whereby the School of Electrical and Computer Sciences started talking to Google, IBM, and Microsoft together to find out what exactly is the driving force behind the IT future. And I happen to be on the panel from the perspective that we make chips for all kind of mobile applications and sensors, wireless sensor networks, and stuff like that. So basically, that's the core part which start negotiating with the IT solutions on one side and the business optimization on the other. So they started writing up a kind of a note that what kind of trends this IT industry is following with the solution providing agency as well as the government level enterprises and enterprises in general. There were 7 or 8 different parameters, and I'm sure that I'm going to actually go one by one, which perhaps would set the tone of discussion right. Not exactly the technical orientation, but also from the perspective that what kind of management excellence is going to go hand in hand with the performance of the IT in the perspective of future. So number one was basically, weirdly, it's a social platform. Well, one can actually argue on this one, but the evolution of social media into social platform is going to be a trend as well as a problem, as well as a potential solution to various many things in terms of the management enterprise and the future strategies. Platform architecture, some of our colleagues basically have listed in one of those option areas, but then resolve complexity of data management will be a problem as well as a solution, as well as an integral part of the future diversity of IT, management, and enterprise altogether. Cloud computing, one of the speakers have mentioned it. Software as a service and platform as a service will perfectly cement the IT's role as a driver of business growth. Open sources are definitely into the picture. Agile, performance elevated, also looking into the growth of the market, but really putting forward some lines of concerns. So one has to actually address those. Data security, you need to detect, you need to assess and respond to the threat. So you need to define the threat perception first. And threat perception in this industry comes from almost every dimension and every side. Data privacy is also of the concern. The leading players will develop superior level of understanding enterprise-wide about the distinctions between the data processor and data controller. Now that's the real debate actually lies on the forefronts of this differentiation. We need to redefine perhaps from the perspective of the enterprise, perhaps from the perspective of the business solution optimization process engineer or a process engineer working in one of the IT firms. Analytics, you mentioned about that. That's very, very important. Will no more be a simple game. This is no more be a purely and simple extension of business management solutions. But this will be perhaps a talking point for everyone to think of more leverages being looked at in the analytics, the way we are actually doing it, the way companies are doing it, the way people who are actually into the IT field and IT management enterprise for the best excellence management perspective need to look at what kind of analytics they're going to do in, for example, 10 years time line from now. Architecture is very important. IT is evolving from a world that is server-specific, server-centric, to something which is service-centric, service-specific. So monolithic approach perhaps is not going to get work. You need to be at a pole of multiple dimensions. You need to actually leave monolithic attitude aside and look into the progression of architecture, progression of architectural platform in altogether different perspective for systems, for applications, and business processes from one another. And lastly, very, very important one, and that's basically perhaps the most important from the enterprise point of view, and that's the user experience. Today, all the businesses, process designs are totally driven by the need of optimization of solution and perhaps the cost reduction. Cost reduction had been the talk of the town, for example, in the last 5 years, but not anymore. I mean, basically, it's getting a trade-off between cost effectiveness as well as optimization of the solution. But tomorrow, perhaps it's going to be different, in 2016 for that matter, or 2020 for that matter. You need to create specific superior user experience that helps to boost the customer satisfaction. So the enterprise needs to put everything down together and look into the perspective of IT frontiers before they make any decision what their IT departments perhaps going to look around in next 5 to 10 years time.
Thank you. That's very good.
So I don't have much to add to what my esteemed colleagues have said. I'd like to add maybe one trend that seems important to me that hasn't quite been mentioned yet, and that's kind of the Internet of Things, or the kind of proliferation of devices that are creating more and more of these big data problems that Paul mentioned earlier. Also, I would share my perspective on the IT industry here, especially in Southeast Asia. I've spent a lot of time talking to people in companies, in human resources, and in IT management, and trying to identify the problems that enterprises here are facing. And it's actually related to what Dr. Ahmed was saying, that the importance of architecture. And here I'm not talking about enterprise architecture, just IT systems architecture very specifically is a skill that is extremely, extremely rare and needed in this region. So I hope to say that the trend had better be to increase capacity for software architectures and IT systems architecture in this region. That's an important area where we're lacking. And then also the last perspective that I have is on the labor market here. I was a little bit surprised to hear Professor Gulej mention, kind of the commoditization, not only of infrastructure, but also of programmers, right? That this is happening in the U.S. At the time that I was working in the U.S., in every company I ever worked in, the technical person was how can I say, a king, right? Then when I came to and most companies have some very elaborate track of professional development for technical people, right? Parallel management and technical tracks that go right to the top of the organization. So I found that when I came to this region, it seems that the opposite is true. That the commoditization of the programmer happened a long time ago, right? The common programmer is treated as unskilled laborer almost, and most enterprises here don't seem to value technical depth, right? So anyway, I hope there's some happy medium there where we'll see that IT deep skills in the needed areas of IT become more valuable and better recognized here in this region. This is important for the development of domestic capacity in the region.
I think that a couple things I'd just like to add from the experience I've seen, similar to what Matt mentioned about the Internet of Things. What we see in the sensor networks that we work with is very rapidly a movement from these distributed sensors, which are either hardwired or perhaps very sophisticated types of specialized communication has to be set up to pull the data from those remote sensors. Now everything is able to plug in many cases, directly to the phone network, the mobile phone network. So we see a lot of telephony applications. We can connect data, whereas before data had to go through this very long process to come from these in situ sensors, going through a number of intermediaries before it could finally be brought into the data center. And today the sensor can commonly communicate directly to the internet and directly to the data center or a cloud, some cloud environment. And that really is producing some amazing applications, which we see a proliferation of applications, a proliferation of sensor devices, and that's really, I think, a quite exciting area of development. Another thing I think is quite interesting is in software development over the last decade, the concept of agile processes. I think it's a really fascinating area, and that this notion of very quick development of software with a very strong automation of strongly defined processes internal to the software development, but also those processes are very well automated. And many of the technologies that have been mentioned earlier, that notion of data management, of cloud computing, of architecture, a lot of this is really built into this agile software approach. And so now, maybe 4 years ago, we were talking about in software engineering about agility as being something, a short turnaround cycle would be, a couple weeks, a month, and now there's a large movement towards continuous development. I mean, this notion of very quick turnarounds, which are sort of very just no longer iterations, just having continuous development of software products. And so I think that in Thailand, it seems to me that there's much more of a ready acceptance of this type of agility, which is leading to many companies being able, I think many in the software companies being able to develop software very quickly. Whereas outside of Thailand and in Southeast Asia, it seems to me when I've talked to people even in Vietnam and other areas which are also quite active in software development, that there's much, that the agile processes are having a little bit more difficulty in taking root, perhaps. So anyway, I think that the notion of processes that we've talked about in general and automation of those processes is very obvious in software development. And software developers are taking advantage of a lot of these technologies to create very quick setup of test environments to different platforms, can be put in the cloud and tested very easily. So I think software developers are really, in Thailand, are really starting to take advantage of these kinds of technologies.
Thank you. If I understand, information technology is a technology to transfer information from one place to another place or one person to another person without the proximity or physical proximity. Then the history of IT goes back to the human civilization when we, the human beings, could invent how to write. Because that was the first IT, that technology, I would say, information, which could communicate from one place to another place without having the place, or from one generation to another generation. Of course, over the years, with the human development, economic development, this IT technologies also has developed, and that development took place, first of all, when we went from the writing to the Morse code, that even without writing, you can communicate, you can transfer the information from one place to another place. That is what we call the fax system or the telephone system. So these are some of the, I should say, breakthrough technologies of IT at the early stage. Of course, the most important breakthrough came particularly when this internet came into the commercial use in 1995. And we all know what happened after that. This IT with internet, with computer and all those things, it has changed almost everything. Before I go further, I should tell that I am looking to IT from the management and business perspective, what it has, its impact and all those things. What IT can do, what IT is doing, and what IT could do in future. So what we have seen after the internet, it has changed even the business scenario, business competitive advantage and all those things. The people, some of the organizations which were competing based on oligopoly or monopoly things, IT has changed them to go to the mass market, to the fragmented market. So they could not compete if they go for this initial one. Then we see here, even the business, it has come, the e-business, everything we have done, and we have done all those things there. If we look to some of these things in a periodical way or in a one-by-one fashion, then what we see is particularly that these things has changed the mobility, or IT nowadays has changed the mobility of the people, that is mobile revolution. Where I'm here, there, or there, whatever it is, I have the access to the information if I want. But it has some advantage as well as some disadvantage. Nowadays, many of my colleagues tell that when he is on leave, his boss calls him. He doesn't want that. There are something, this is there. So the mobility, and we have the devices that we talk about, from the computer to the tablets to the smartphones and all those things, and it's growing so fast, and it has also, not only to the business, to the social. My colleagues have already told that particularly we are talking about the social media and all those things. That is, the network in the marketplace, we call from the business point of view. That from the business enterprises, it's not that you are dominating, you are communicating with your customers, but also the customers themselves are communicating with each other. And they also have their complaints, they have their solutions given to you. So there is what we call it, it's a network marketplace, not one-to-one or the individual marketplace that we have. And if I call the advantage that, particularly in Thailand, one of my doctoral students carried out some study on particularly the IT applications in the hotel industry in Thailand. We find that in Thailand, the hotel industries are using IT very judiciously, because for many purposes, depending on the destination, whether it is in Phuket, whether it is in the northern part, or whether it is somewhere else from where the customers are coming. So they have adopted, they have developed the IT solutions accordingly to their business advantage. So directly communicate with the customer. So it has also, IT has in the business, has removed the intermediaries, the traveling agents and all those things. Directly they communicate with the hotels and then come and do their businesses. The other thing that we see, my colleague already told, it's the sensor, the applications particularly in the business. Sensors, it's not only in the business, even in the medical science. Nowadays, some patients, something already been there, and then he is being monitored by the doctor from a remote place, what he is doing and whatever it is doing. So that type of application has already evolved in IT. Now, next thing that I would like to talk about, that what is going to happen in the future. What I see, that IT itself is not going alone. IT, it's a convergence between IT, telecommunication, computer, and all these things are converging together. We have one IT set which does everything. So here there is a challenge, particularly for the people who are working on the technical aspects of IT, that is how to converge all those things together without losing the essence of each of these things. Now, we are talking about the customer satisfaction also. Here, IT particularly plays very important role. And then we see here that the knowledge management area, new area that is growing, where IT is being used extensively, particularly when some of the organizations, they go for knowledge-enabled customer relationship management. So this is another area where we see that in this Asia-Pacific region, many of these companies, they have started IT. I will stop it here and then.
Thank you very much for that overview. And we don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to propose the following. I'm going to make a couple of assertions, 3 of them in fact, and I want you to signify, yes, I agree. But if you don't, I want you to explain why you don't. And then I'll get to a harder question. So the first assertion is that going into the future, there's going to be continued commoditization of infrastructure and applications, and managed services is going to continue to grow in the marketplace. Do you agree or disagree with that statement?
Well, looking into the background of our discussion, I agree with that.
Okay.
Agree.
This is easy. Yes, I agree as well.
Okay. Okay. All right. Here's the second one. There'll be more.
Okay, no problem, no problem. It's okay.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
Do you agree or disagree or don't care?
No, it's okay. I agree, but it has to be tailored a little bit from the case to case because what I find from my if you simply depend on somebody else and all those things, that it doesn't work because I have seen many cases where somebody has taken introduction of the IT, developing and all those things for a particular. At the end of the day, instead of fulfilling the purpose, it has become a IT project rather than the project for which it has. So that is the thing that I will add.
Okay. The second assertion is that cloud technologies and solutions are going to continue to evolve and mature. Do you think that? Do you agree with that assertion, or do you not agree with that assertion?
Well, partly agree.
Okay.
And just one liner with that. Cloud computing has been a buzzword for management, enterprise, and business solutions. But recently, people have started looking into the possibilities of using not the public cloud, but also looking into the possibilities of having their own private clouds, which perhaps is going to change the facet of what business intelligence is all about.
Yeah, certainly agree, but then with the same caveat that maybe the cloud is not the right solution for every application or solution. I guess I recently read that the country of Australia has directed that no government data may be stored outside of Australia. So you continue to see these kinds of very protective aspects.
It may be being stored and they don't know it. Yeah.
Yes, I also agree. I think that that some of the issues that were already raised about the notion of a private cloud, especially with the comments mentioned earlier, not just for industry, but perhaps even at the national level, could be a much a movement in that direction. Also, we found that certainly as the cloud evolves, it will address a lot of the issues that we see today. Still, performance for convenience is a huge advantage for the cloud, but performance is still lagging a bit. But I think that will change in the very near future.
Cloud computing is coming, and whether we like it or not, to me, it will go ahead. This is the first thing. However, I have concern about the confidentiality, particularly with this. And to give you an example, my friend tell that why don't you buy Apple? That means I bought Samsung because they say that I can store my data in my USB and other extra things which I cannot put it in the Apple tablet. And they said that why don't you put it in the cloud? I said no, I don't believe, because somebody else, yes, I have my one, but somebody is the administrator and he has the access to everything. So if something confidential, I don't like to put it there. Thanks.
And then the final assertion is that there's going to be a growing emphasis on security, and there's going to be a lot of investment in different technologies and solutions that affects cybersecurity.
Yeah, that is the challenge.
Well, that's very challenging to assert, I would say. The first part, of course, security is important. It's not just security, cybersecurity or data security. Someone has put it very rightly on the cover page of Science about like 2 months ago, that it's not security but screening which matters. And basically perhaps the same kind of continuation of this argument that on national levels and people who are actually looking into the projects which are of extreme importance for someone's perspective basically are bound to look into the possibilities of having the secure and unscreened. Who is controlling the data is more important. The second part is to the futuristic continuing growth and investment and looking into the possibility of new technologies being adopted on the management enterprise level. I would say that this is pretty much concerned with the global integration and economic cooperation. So it is more towards the economic and geopolitical facets of the argument rather than just putting a technical stance into it.
Yeah, certainly agree. And I guess one thing that's kind of interesting about security is this might be a big driver for open source solutions. Actually, my wife is a cryptographer, and she's always telling me about the point of keeping protocols open, right? And so that they can be examined, attacked, revised, and so on. So yeah, so IT security, I think, will benefit from openness and putting the secret in the key rather than in obfuscation and things like that. So I'll be interested to see this development.
I think one area that's quite interesting related to security is it seems that there's a generation that is coming which seems to have a very different notion of privacy than I don't know if sometimes I feel like there's just a huge difference between the people that my staff and me when it comes to privacy. Like they log everything that they do, and they're quite happy to share all of this information with everybody. And what we see through Facebook, I think we're just starting to see the applications that are taking advantage of that come and make it obvious how visible how much that information can be used. I think just this last week, Facebook released a graph search algorithm as an open product that allows people to see everything that everybody else can see about you, and it shows these social networks very clearly in a way that is quite powerful. And I do think that the importance of security, for a long time, there's cybersecurity and data security. These are extremely important issues for criminal areas. But I think privacy is, I'm not sure if it's just a generational thing, but I do think that we're going to see more applications that are become much easier to use, that are able to take advantage of this information, which is very easily available. And we'll see maybe business opportunities on that side, as well as perhaps a back current, like we see with the Google Glass initiative, for example, and some of the response by people as well as governments and establishments against this kind of open availability of data.
I look to the problem from two perspectives. One is from the privacy aspect, another is the security, and that is the thing, data security or the cyber security. As far as the privacy concerned, it is a social movement, and when there are the technology, it also changes the societal behavior of the people and all those things. I think that was one of the reasons what my friend was telling, that somebody is ready, somebody is not. So it's moving towards that something you can share easily with others. Previously, perhaps you were not able to share, and you were a little bit conservative with respect to that. So it depends on the society or the people itself. Now, about the security itself, that if there is a hacker and all those things, which can, but this is particularly, we have seen that the banks and everything, it is going there. So this is a really big concern. In addition to that, there is another kind of thing which is at a mega level. I think if there is a third world war, that world war will be a cyber network, not drone or something putting here and there. So that type of security is particularly, because otherwise you can jam, you can stop everything, and the whole thing is gone there. So that is a big challenge for IT. Thanks.
So we're supposed to end at 4:30, but we started just a little bit late, so I'm going to do one final round to try to come to closure and pull everything together. You've heard the kind of overview of the trends, and you've heard the discussion about the assertions, and now I want to talk about what other analysts have predicted and get the panel to make some comments on that. Because of the commoditization and the move to managed services and the cloud. Some organizations as prominent as Gartner Group have predicted the demise of the IT department and the CIO. Sorry, gentlemen, to tell you that, but that's on the record. Then you have Mr. Wozniak, who was the co-director of Apple, who says, no, just the opposite. The cloud's going to fail, and there's going to be a tremendous uprising in the community, and people are going to demand freedom once again and move back to a more dispersed and distributed model of IT management. So that seems to be kind of the area where there's tremendous disagreement about the future and where this is all going to go. And I thought it would be interesting to get your views on how you think this might play out. Are we going to move back to a more decentralized model where the IT department has to manage many different devices and many different solutions in a more prominent role? Or are we going to move more to an outsourced managed services environment with continued commercial commoditization and managed services, and the IT department's going to become a thing of the past?
I think that's the best part. Because the reason being, I think you quoted two very good examples. But I'm inclined to go with the similar kind of survey carried out by Accenture about like 6 months ago, whereby they invited 10 mega multinationals, the leaders, the global leaders in business enterprise using IT services, and about like 40 selected small to medium scale companies giving services to these big multinationals, particularly in Singapore, in China, in Pakistan, and in India. And the survey is basically on their website, and anybody can basically go and have a look on the presentation, very well-versed presentation. The result is simple. 68% of the CEOs or the decision makers of those companies altogether, the 10 big multinationals, and 40 outsourced companies providing services, mega services to these multinational companies for business enterprise and management excellence. 68% of them, they were having no clear vision what the IT future will look like by 2016, and 2016 is not really far. So very, very quick comment on what you said, that you said everything right, but I can't make any predictions on those ones.
Fair enough.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm not a Buddhist, but I definitely agree with the middle path. I don't see either of these points of views, taking hold completely. I think so part of it depends on control, right? So organizations that need control over their IT are going to tend to want to bring those solutions in house, right? And not trust cloud solutions. But at the same time, where those aspects are not so important, then for sure, we can benefit from eliminating IT departments, or at least some of the roles of the IT department. For example, my department still maintains its own email server after all of these years, right? And this is okay. It's a computer science department, so maybe it's a good thing to do, but it's pretty useless, in fact, and we shouldn't be doing these kind of things. The scale of Gmail and things like that is definitely a much more effective and available solution than local IT support. I'm thinking maybe, though, also, it depends on the scale of the organization, right? So once you reach a certain scale, then it's going to make more sense to have your own, even if you're invested in the kinds of services that the cloud can provide, you're going to want a private cloud, not trust your resources to the public cloud. So anyway, and then a private cloud may have more or less functionality than what we see in the public cloud. So anyway, those are my points.
Well, I do think that that there are going to be more and more services which become available. I think that we see services, cloud-based services, really as being able to make excellent processes available to a much broader range of people than otherwise. I mean, even in very complex environments such as I've seen what is like cloud ML, so machine learning that is easy for people to set up and start using very quickly. We see examples of a lot of these very, very strong and powerful services which can be easily accessed. But I do think that it's not going to become a single service provider which everyone will use. I think that there's a lot of room for customization and to have services which are very specific to much smaller markets. So a proliferation of very specialized services which are done very well. So maybe the role of the CIO will not be go away, but that there will be more complex interactions between services, that you have very granular types of services which are then integrated. We do see a lot of, back in the comments about around social activities, a lot of these events are consumed. People's activities, information can be consumed by many different services. So I think that that certainly the role of these publicly available or commercially available services will become even more important.
I would like to address also the issue that my friend raised about our CEOs. Many of them, they don't have any clue sometimes, many of them, that what is the role and what it can do for the organization itself. Probably it is because of particularly in this region, these countries, the technology infrastructure, if I call it IT infrastructure, which includes the human resources, the telecommunication facilities, the manpower with respect to particularly the computer and IT, plus from the user's perspective is the IT literacy. Yeah, we may have got the degree, we have a highest degree and all those literacy, but maybe many of them we see here, they do not know what is IT, how to use it and all those things, still in many of these countries and many of the organizations in this region. So that could be one of the reasons that still they are in a fix what to do and what not to do. Now, second issue that we are talking about, that outsourcing the services. I would rather give an example of very recently, another one of my doctoral student who is one of the senior executives, in fact, managing director of one of the telecom companies in Sri Lanka. So Sri Lankan telecommunication company, that is the thing, the government one, they are trying to outsource it. But at the end of the day, we found that, yes, outsourcing 100% and telling outsource is a vague term. Now, outsourcing, what are the activities you are outsourcing? Which activities you should keep with yourself, and which activities you should only, or which elements you should outsource? So it's not simply outsourcing or in-house maintenance. It should be a combination between these two, neither this or not that. So that is the appropriate thing that we find here.
Well, Dr. Naveed, we've done our best to either clarify or confuse, whichever point of view you want to take. And I see that the next item on the agenda is closing remarks. And I'm assuming that will be you. It's not listed who that will be.
Thanks so much. Thank you so much, Schoolage, for, I think this panel discussion has been really scintillating, and I really wish that we had a bigger audience that we had in the morning to witness this beautiful, very, very nice discussion. And so I would first of all like to thank you and all the panelists for this very insightful discussion, and I really enjoyed all of the views. And I mean, now I was wishing that I was in the panel. But anyway, thank you so much, and I would like to thank all the audience participants for staying with us and also accepting our invitation to join this event. And we sincerely hope that AIT will continue to organize such events in the future. And please, you have our contacts. If you have any questions after this one, please do feel free to contact us. As we mentioned earlier, we will be putting up all of these presentations with the permission of the authors on our website. So maybe from next week onwards, they should be available for you to download. And then maybe you can, if you have further questions about that, comments about that, please do let us know, and we will try to communicate with you. So thank you so much, and hopefully look forward to see you in the next event. Thank you.